This was the scene 2 days ago when Zimbabwe's Finance Minister, Patrick Chinamasa, came to London to plead with the UK government for funding to save its economy. The reason many Zimbabweans in the UK are against the idea started many miles away.
Wednesday, the 6th of July 2016, we are shutting Zimbabwe down. We want to make a point. This government needs to know that the citizens are the ones that gave them the power. Indians, your shops close. White people, your shops close. Black people, your shops close. Varai, varai, varai. Nobody goes to work on that day.
With what is being called a successful campaign, we caught up with the organizer, Pastor Evan Mawarire.
Zimbabweans are saying to their government, why do you think that it takes someone from outside giving us money for us to raise concerns about the fact that there is no water in my tap or there is no water at the hospital where I go? We live this life every day, so we know what we're facing. We don't need funding to speak up against, against an injustice or against corruption.
So are you saying you don't need international support? So why should people in Britain be concerned of what you were doing back in Zimbabwe?
Oh, the support is definitely wanted and needed. What I'm saying is that we don't do it because we have been funded, but we do it because this is our country. No one else has got the best interest of Zimbabwe except Zimbabweans. In times past, Zimbabweans have sat back and we have called on the West, even opposition parties, and Zimbabweans have called on the African Union, they've called on SADC to act. And whilst that support is needed, it should always be secondary to the first move of the Zimbabweans themselves getting to a place where they're saying enough is enough, we're fed up, and we don't want to carry on like this anymore. And that's the point we made yesterday. And now this government, I believe in my heart, no matter what they say, now they've stood up to listen.
Why do you think it's important that people in the United Kingdom know what's happening in Zimbabwe?
It's very, very important because, as you saw, our government representatives, and to be precise, the Minister of Finance was here to beg for funding, despite the fact that they actually owe the international community loads and loads of money. They've come here to beg for money. They were on sanctions because there's no rule. One of the reasons being there's no rule of law in Zimbabwe. But here they are coming back to the West when they're actually preaching the opposite to the people back home about the West. They come here to beg for money, and they don't tell the truth. When they beg for money, they want to enrich themselves, further enrich themselves, because they're already filthy rich. And our people in Zimbabwe are suffering and starving. And listen to Chinamasa talking on Hard Talk. There's nobody starving in Zimbabwe. Which Zimbabwe is he talking about?
With over 110,000 Zimbabweans in the UK, 11,000 of them come from the West Midlands. So I invited ZANU PF UK representative from Wolverhampton to answer why his party feels the UK government should help Zimbabwe in its time of need.
The government could be held responsible for the missing of those finances, but at the end of the day, the government doesn't run the business. The business is run by private firms, private entities. The government only do an oversight of the general economy. So what I would say is the government probably should come up with the stringent measures that deters that kind of activity where we end up having an economic loss of 15 billion. That's the key point. But also, the government must also take some responsibility to ensure whoever gets the tender in future of providing any kind of service, there should be checks and balances. And those who are caught kind of being corrupt or misrepresenting the natural resources of the country, as it were, they should be brought to justice. And also the government maybe should move fast to try to set a precedent that if somebody is ever going to do those kind of stuff, then the government will come heavily down on them. But as of now, that's the people, what they are hoping, that the government should be seen doing something about it. And talking about it only is not going to solve issues, but we need to do actual actions that mitigate against those kind of losses.
When is it going to be time that the ZANU-PF ruling party actually admit that they've got things wrong, things need to change? And ironically, you're blaming the people, you've blamed the British, you've blamed just the way things are in terms of the sanctions. But not anywhere do we ever hear ZANU or yourself, as you sat here, blaming yourself, the ruling party, in the way the economy has gone down. When will that day come when enough is enough and the ruling party steps aside and lets people who can actually manage the country come up and do the right job for its people, because the people's voice has spoken?
As the issues of Zimbabwe, the key point, we need to put them into context. You can't compare the situation, economic situation of Zimbabwe and the UK. These are different stages of development. Maybe if you look back in the UK, the stage Zimbabwe is at the stage of development, economic history. UK maybe also experienced those kind of problems. But over time, they overcome as a people when they come to solve their own problem through industrial revolution and so many economic phases that has gone past. But the same trajectory, Zimbabwe has to walk its own way. Sometimes it's not a rosy way. Sometimes there's bumps, sometimes uphills, sometimes you go to accelerate on a level. But the key point is that every country must be allowed to determine or to chart its own destiny. As for the Zimbabwean case, you have to put things into context. Things don't start by just falling apart or getting bad as they are now. It's starting from many, many years, starting from the late 90s, sanctions, MDC. And obviously the government, like I said, it's not a sin. There are some issues the government could have done better, which the government probably is now looking into it, especially the issue of corruption. The government maybe must show a little bit of biting of teeth, especially those people in high offices. So if the Paris Club deem necessary that there's a business case to invest in Zimbabwe, they will find it possible to finance Zimbabwe. And even individuals in the UK, there's a lot of opportunities in Zimbabwe to invest in. And as soon as we invest and as long as people are going to invest, then that's the only way the situation in Zimbabwe is going to change. It's not going to change by standoffs. It's not going to change by stairways. It's going to change by people taking real actions to dig, to till the land, to produce goods and services in industries, to make sure finance is circulating efficiently in the system, and each and everyone playing their part. The government can do wonders, set nice policies, do road shows, promote Zimbabwe. But at the end of the day, it's not the government that's going to do the nitty-gritty operation on the ground. It's you and me who is going to produce goods and services to make Zimbabwe better.
And as we talked for the next 15, 20 minutes, one thing was clear, that the Zimbabwean situation, as well as the UK relations with the government, is a long way from a reconciliation. Tafadzwa Mushipe, Big News, Warsaw.